So I was working with a large organization many years back, and they were making the transition to being more client focused. In other words, they were seeking clients instead of customers. They wanted people who would do repeat business. They wanted to have an enterprise relationship with them. They were going out and seeking out organizations and associations and corporations that would call them for everything. And business development was doing their job. They were bringing in some opportunities. Now, not every first opportunity is like, something to get, super excited about. Sometimes they're just little tests. They're little tastes of business. And what happened to these folks is they had an opportunity to add another major university to their portfolio. And they have some very big universities that they worked with. And here was another one. Here was another one beckoning them to do a small event on their behalf to get their foot in the door, right? This is what we're looking for. University relationships, for those of you who work in that space, you know that with a little bit of effort, these become client relationships. You get an opportunity to do all of their business. But here's the secret about clients. You have to do all of the business. You don't get to pick and choose. And what happened in this situation was great new opportunity, potential client came to them with a small project in a very busy time period. And my client walked away. I found out about it afterwards. I came unglued on them. Why? Because we don't turn down client work. Now, the rebuttal, of course, from sales was, well, they weren't our client. We've never worked with them before. It was the first time. It was an RFP, blah, blah, blah. I said, you sought them out. They meet all the criteria of a potential client, and you didn't take the one step that would allow you to cement that relationship and have a chance of doing all the business. Well, we're already really busy. You're trying to get busier. That's why you're doing business development. All right. That's what today's podcast is going to be about. You need to understand the difference between a customer and a client and never treat one like the other. Welcome to your weekly dose of uncommon sense, helpful insights, and tough love. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. The Intentional Success Podcast comes to you through the generous support of Mertz Crew.
Mertz Crew helps top AV companies book quality AV freelancers. Your choice, your rates. We handle contracts, insurance, and payments. You save time, cost, and reduce risk. Start today at mertzcrew.com.
Now on to the show. Back in my previous career, before I was a consultant and I worked for a major company, we were acquired. It was actually the second time we were acquired, and the new CEO came in and did a little presentation, and he talked about the things that were very important to him. He talked about CapEx. He talked about equipment shrink. He went on and on about a long story about, what happens if you lose a piece of equipment, and you're not just losing the replacement cost of the equipment, you're losing all the future revenue streams. And he waxed on about it. But the other thing he talked about, which was new to us, was actually worth listening about, was the difference between a customer and a client. And he said, customers come to you every time as if they've never worked with you before and ask for you to give them a quote, look at their opportunity, and they will decide once again whether or not to hire you. Clients come to you assuming they're going to hire you, and it's always your business to lose. And we want clients because retaining clients is easier because they're always in front of you. They don't want to change vendors. Nobody loves mistakes. Clients are more likely to tolerate mistakes. In fact, they often expect them, and that's factored into their relationship. And they're going to give you another chance, and they're going to let you know when you're not doing well. Likewise, you can talk to them very much the same way. Clients are the goal for most of us. We want those kinds of nurtured relationships. However, clients are a different level of work and commitment than customers. And customers come to you when they need help, but they're also probably talking to other companies. They're not committed. they're not aligned with any one provider. Even though they may choose you most of the time, they haven't decided in their brains that they're going to choose you all of the time. Therefore, every job you are reassessed, and that is taken into consideration when you move on to the next job. Now, that doesn't seem like it could be a huge difference, except it is. Clients choose you for one reason, customers choose you for another, and we can't treat them the same way. And going back to my preamble here a little bit ago, look at the buyer. Is that type of buyer typically a customer or a client? Back in my sales career, I sold primarily to agencies. Most agencies are customers. They call themselves clients. They like to be thought of as clients. They think of their customers as clients. But the fact of the matter is most agencies are living on the edge of being fired at any given moment on any given day, which means you are too. Now, a good agency client may like working with you and will come to you all the time and be extremely loyal, in which case you might treat them as a client instead of a customer, and they may have earned the respect that a client gets. And you will take on their jobs that have low margin or are not ideal. However, if you sell into the agency world like I did, there's a lot of projects you just don't want to do. This is not what we're good at. If my agency customer came to me with 80 breakout rooms, I was going to go, we don't do breakout rooms. Well, you need to do this for me. I said, no, I don't. I'll help you. I'll give you the RFP. I'll send you to a company that can do that for you, but I'm not the company to do that for you. So customer relationships are different. You can turn down a customer just like they're going to turn down you. And you need to know that going in. So what I said about not treating a customer like a client or treating a client like a customer is the big takeaway lesson for us today. Many times I've been out in the warehouse, with my clients, talking to the warehouse manager, talking to the guys, seeing the salesperson run out with a last minute order for the most important customer in the world that we need this thing. We've got to drop everything and get this for them. In the salesperson's mind, bless their hearts, they think that their buyer is a client, when in fact, what they have is a customer who's being very opportunistic and taking advantage of the fact that the salesperson is treating them like a client and will step and fetch for them. Will also price things aggressively for them. Will go outside the bounds of normal business for them. In other words, they will bend over backwards for somebody who is not really worthy of client level services. And on any given day, if the answer is, well, I need $1,500 for this, and they go, well, I got to give you $1,000. He goes, well, no, I have to have 15. They're going to move on, right? That's what customers do. So when you start to see this in your organization, when you see your sales team getting behind somebody who doesn't seem to deserve it, we need to look as managers into this and say, who are our customers and who are our clients? Do this for me. Print out your top 25 customers by volume. Matter of fact, print them all out, right? This is the 80-20 rule. 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients. When you start getting down into the small numbers, the 1 comma clients, all of a sudden you start to see a lot of people who are a little bit of a pain in the butt. You see a lot of people that are asking you to jump through hoops, and they may have been with you for a long time, but you'll often find people that you're treating like a client when you should be treating them like a customer. In other words, you should be raising your prices. You should be more selective about what you're willing to do for them. You should be more willing to push back against their demands so that you have more resources to cater to your clients. So if you look at your top 10, if there's a lot of clients in there, customers will get in the way of your client business. We can't say no to clients. On the busiest week of the year, if a customer calls, it's okay to say, we're too busy, we can't help you. When a client calls, they say, we can help you. Here's what I have to do in order to accommodate you. Your regular team is not available. However, I've got suppliers who can get me the equipment we need. I will personally attend to your job to make sure it's handled properly. We've got some great freelancers I can put on this project. You will take care of them. It may not be their normal team. The gear may not have your name on it, but that's why they're calling you, because they know you are going to take care of it. And it's okay to say, hey, this is a little late. I've got to move some things around, but here's what I can do for you. And that's how we treat clients. This is how we earn and keep and retain their loyalty. We don't turn them down. In exchange, we expect them to call us for everything. And we get to, call them on it when they don't. Hey, I see you're putting the graduation out for bid this year. Let's sit down. Let's talk about this. Let me understand what's going on. Right? It's like, hey, if you were ready to put this out to bid, I should have been your first call. You should have let me know what's going on here. What happened to our relationship? Okay, what has changed about this? Do you need to get some better numbers? Do you have a new boss? Is there somebody new in procurement? Okay, in which case, I need to talk to them. Okay, we've been doing this together for years. Let's sit down. Let me do our capabilities presentation to this new influencer in your organization so that they can learn our value and the value of our partnership. So that's why you want clients, but not everybody wants clients. Let me give you an example. There's nothing wrong with being an RFP-based business. There's nothing wrong with being project-based. If you work for agencies, if you work for local corporations who might have a national organization that buys from somebody else, but locally they buy from you, every project's going to be an opportunity to win or lose. And these are customers. And if they keep coming back for you, great. That's awesome. You keep having the chance to win that business. But we can't treat them like a client. We can't treat them under the assumption that we're going to win this business because we did this job last year. We know going in that we have to prove ourselves every single time. We have to listen carefully to see how their needs have changed since the last time, see what's going on in the organization. Are they more price sensitive this year? Are they more finish sensitive? Has personnel changed or the presenter's different? Find out what's going on. Not that we don't have to pay attention to that with clients, but with customers, they need to see you paying attention to that and know that you're engaging with each project like it was fresh and new, and you're not taking any part of a relationship for granted. In other words, nobody's going to get fired for hiring you because they're not doing their due diligence. Always make them look good by being diligent about your response. And customer-based business is a great model for many companies to be in. It allows them to go after, if you like those big jobs and those big projects, here's how you go after them. You want the $1 million project, but you don't want the $50,000 projects that trail on behind it? Great. Seek customers. Okay. If you want a steady stream of long-term revenue from a handful of businesses, relatively speaking, if you want to work for fewer companies and organizations that do more work, then seek clients. Now, you can do both. There's nothing wrong with doing both. However, you need to know what you're dealing with. Am I dealing with a customer? Am I dealing with a client? And use the appropriate process in that situation. Client calls, they're dealing with something new. Awesome. We're going to do the discovery call. We're going to bring the A team onto the call and talk through and bounce ideas around and give them budget suggestions. But that conversation will be different than if it's a customer calling and sending you an RFP, and they're going to answer your questions neutrally because there's 5 other vendors that they're talking to also, and they want to keep the playing field level. So the steps may look the same, but the conversations will be different. And how we negotiate at the end is also different. So I'm going to close this by saying, for clients, for a loyal client, you make their budget go as far as you humanly can, and you never question their budget. For customers, you tell them what their budget will buy. End of story. So there's a limit on what you will do for a customer. There's very few limits on what you do for a client. But if a client is continually over asking for their budget, you do have the opportunity to push back and reframe that for them, because if they want to maintain that client relationship, they've got to give a little as well. Customers, if they don't like your position, they'll go buy from somebody else. But chances are, on any given day, you might be the most effective seller for that particular project. And you don't know, and that's the excitement for some of us, is we like dealing with RFPs from customers, and we like the chase, and we like the win, and we like the margins when we were the right choice. So customers, clients, they're both fantastic, but never treat them the same way. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode of the Intentional Success Podcast, please leave a review and don't forget to like and subscribe. This podcast has been brought to you by the helpful folks at Mertz Crew.